She was on the kitchen floor, barefoot, bleeding from the mouth. Her husband's boot had just connected with her ribs. His sister stood in the doorway, smirking, holding a garbage bag stuffed with clothes. Not a suitcase. A garbage bag. That's what 31 years of life was worth to them. "You're done here," the sister said. "My
As you can
brother
hear in this
deserves
recording,
better."
Mr. Hargrove admits his
They
involvement.
dragged her to the porch.
It was my fault, I admit it.
Slammed the door.
You're gonna regret
Clicked
this.
the deadbolt. Left her sitting on
Cece,
the
are you
concrete
okay?
steps with nothing.
We were worried.
No phone, no wallet, no shoes. Just a garbage bag and a secret growing inside her. Because Cecilia Hargrove was 8 weeks pregnant, and the father of her baby was not her husband. The father was a billionaire, a man who had been searching for her for weeks, a man with the resources to burn their entire world to the ground. But Darren and Brenda didn't know that. They thought they had broken her. They thought she had nothing. They thought she would disappear quietly into the night like a dog kicked off the porch. They were wrong. What happened next didn't just change Cecilia's life. It destroyed every lie the Hargrove family had built, every secret they buried, every dollar they stole, every bruise they pretended didn't exist. This is a story about a woman who lost everything in one night and gained something no one saw coming. Not revenge. Something far more powerful. The truth. Message to the audience. This story carries one message that matters. You are never as trapped as they need you to believe. The door is unlocked. It always was. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is pick up a garbage bag, walk 11 blocks on bleeding feet, and knock on the one door that will open. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or if it gave you something you needed to hear today, leave a comment below. Tell us which moment hit you the hardest.
Share this with the woman in your life who needs to hear that her story matters. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Your support is what keeps these stories alive.
Get up. Darren's boat connected with her ribs before Cece could even open her arms. The kitchen tile was cold against her cheek, cold and unforgiving, just like him. She gasped. The air left her lungs in a sharp, broken sound. Her hands scrambled against the floor, trying to push herself upright. But another kick came, this one to her thigh. She crumpled back down. "I said get up." His voice was low, controlled. That was the scariest version of Darren, not the screaming version, the quiet one. Cece's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, a reflex she'd developed over the past 48 hours. A secret living beneath her skin that nobody in this house knew about. 8 weeks. That's how far along she was. 8 weeks of a life growing inside her, while everything outside her was dying. "Darren, she's on the floor," Brenda said from the doorway, not with concern, with observation, like she was watching a nature documentary. Predator and prey. "Just get her stuff and get this over with." Brenda Hargrove leaned against the kitchen counter with her arms crossed. Darren's older sister, 37 years old, polished nails, pressed blouse, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She'd been the architect of this moment. Cece knew that now. She'd always known, somewhere deep and buried. The dinner Cece had cooked was splattered across the wall. Spaghetti sauce dripped down the white paint like something from a crime scene. The garlic had burned while Darren dragged her across the kitchen by her hair. The whole house smelled like char and copper. "You're useless," Darren said. He stood over her, fist still clenched. 34 years old, 6'1", the man who'd promised her forever on a sunny afternoon in June. "You can't even make a decent meal." "I told you she was trash, Darren." Brenda pushed off the counter and walked closer. Her heels clicked against the tile. Click, click, click. Should have listened to me before you married her. Cece tasted blood. The inside of her cheek was torn. She pressed her tongue against the wound and tried to breathe. In, out, in, out. The way the therapist she'd secretly seen twice had taught her. The therapist she couldn't afford to go back to because Darren controlled every dollar. Get her bag, Darren said to Brenda. Brenda was already moving. She disappeared down the hallway and came back carrying a black garbage bag. Not a suitcase, not a duffel. A garbage bag, stuffed with whatever clothes Brenda had decided Cece deserved to keep. Come on. Darren grabbed Cece's arm and hauled her to her feet. His fingers dug into the same bruise from last Tuesday, the one she'd covered with a long-sleeve shirt at work. The one her co-workers pretended not to notice. Darren, please. Her voice cracked. Can we just talk about this? Please. Talk, Oim. He laughed. A single bitter sound. You want to talk. That's all you ever want to do. Talk, talk, talk. I'm done talking, Cece. He dragged her through the living room, past the couch where she'd folded his laundry that morning. Past the bookshelf she'd organized by color, because it made her feel like something in this house was under her control. Past the wedding photo on the mantel. She caught a glimpse of it as Darren shoved her toward the front door. Two smiling people she didn't recognize anymore. The door opened. The evening air hit her face, warm and thick. Late summer. The crickets were already singing. Darren pushed her onto the porch. She stumbled. Her bare feet scraped against the concrete. The garbage bag landed beside her with a dull thud. You're done here, Brenda said from behind Darren. She stood in the doorway like a sentry. My brother deserves better. The door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked. Cece sat on the concrete steps in a thin cotton dress. No shoes, no phone, no wallet, no keys. Just a garbage bag and a baby that nobody knew about. She looked down at the porch steps. The concrete was cracked, 3 long fractures running from one side to the other. She'd been meaning to fill those cracks since they moved in. She never did. She never did a lot of things. 1 crack, 2 cracks, 3 cracks. She counted them like she was counting the years of her marriage, each one deeper than the last. The sprinkler next door hissed on. A dog barked 3 houses down. The streetlight at the end of the block flickered twice and then held steady. The world kept moving. The world always kept moving, even when yours stopped. Cece pressed her palm flat against her stomach. The baby couldn't hear her yet. She knew that. 8 weeks was too early. But she whispered anyway. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She sat there for a long time. She didn't know how long. Time works differently when your world has just ended. Minutes stretch into hours. Hours collapse into seconds. The sky went from orange to purple to black, and Cece sat on the porch counting cracks. Mrs. Calloway across the street watched from her window. Cece could see the curtain move, the old woman's silhouette behind the glass. But Mrs. Calloway didn't come outside. Nobody came outside. Nobody ever did. Eventually, Cece stood. Her ribs screamed. Her thigh throbbed. Her bare feet were numb from the concrete. She picked up the garbage bag and started walking. 11 blocks to Margot's apartment. 11 blocks without shoes, without a phone, without anything except a garbage bag and a secret. The asphalt was still warm from the day's heat. Each step burned. She kept her eyes on the sidewalk and counted her steps the way she'd counted the cracks. 1, 2, 3. Something about counting made chaos feel manageable. By the time she reached Margot's building, her feet were bleeding. Not dramatically, just small cuts from pebbles and glass, small wounds. But it's the small things that break you sometimes. Not the fist, not the door slamming, The pebbles in your bare feet when you have nowhere to go. She pressed the buzzer, waited, pressed it again. The intercom crackled. Who is it? It's me, Cece said. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone very far away. 3 seconds of silence. Then the door buzzed open. Margot was waiting in the hallway. 33 years old, a nurse at St. Catherine's, the kind of woman who could take your blood pressure and your emotional temperature at the same time. She took one look at Cece and pulled her inside without a word. No questions, no gasps, no dramatic reactions, just arms around her and a door closing behind them. That's how you know someone loves you. Not by what they say when your world falls apart, by what they don't say, by the silence they offer when words would only make it worse. Margot ran a bath. She made chamomile tea. She sat on the bathroom floor while Cece sank into the hot water, still wearing her dress, and sobbed until there was nothing left. Then Margot did what nurses do. She checked the bruises. She was professional about it, clinical. But her hands shook, just barely, just enough for Cece to notice. How long? Margot asked. Not a question. A beginning. Tonight was bad, Cece said. That's not what I asked. Cece closed her eyes. The water was turning lukewarm. 2 years. Margot exhaled slowly through her nose. She reached for her phone. I'm documenting everything. Photos. Dates you can remember. Everything. Margot. This is not optional, Cece. So Cece let her. She let Margot photograph the bruise on her ribs, the finger marks on her arm, the split lip, the older marks, yellowed and fading, layered beneath the fresh ones like geological strata, each bruise a different era of the same disaster. When it was done, Margot wrapped Cece in a towel and handed her the tea. It had gone cold, bitter, like everything else that night. There's something else, Cece said. Okay. I'm pregnant. Margot went still, completely still, like someone had pressed pause on the world. It's not Darren's, Cece whispered. The pause stretched. Then Margot sat down slowly on the edge of the tub. Tell me everything, she said. 3 months earlier, Cece had attended a college alumni fundraiser alone. Darren called the event pointless. He said networking was for people who didn't have real jobs. He said she should stay home and stop embarrassing herself by pretending she was something she wasn't. She went anyway. That small rebellion felt enormous at the time. Just getting dressed, just driving there, just walking through the doors of the Meridian Hotel ballroom and pretending she was a whole person. She sat at the bar and ordered a glass of white wine she barely touched. The ballroom was full of people she half recognized. Older versions of kids she'd known a decade ago. Everyone looked successful. Everyone looked like they had their lives figured out. Cece felt like she was wearing a costume. Cecilia Hargrove. Or is it still Dawson? She turned. The man standing beside her was tall. Dark hair streaked with early gray. Warm eyes. A face she hadn't seen in 9 years but recognized instantly. Colton, she said. Colton Ashford. He smiled. Not the kind of smile that tried to impress, the kind that remembered. You gave the best thesis presentation in Professor Milligan's psychology class, he said. Fall semester, 2015. You argued that attachment theory was fundamentally flawed. Milligan looked like he wanted to strangle you. I thought you were the bravest person in the room. Nobody had remembered anything about her in years. Nobody had called her brave in even longer. They talked for 3 hours. Not about money, not about his company, not about the tech empire that had made him one of the wealthiest men under 40. They talked about books, about the weird pizza place near campus that closed at midnight, about the psychology professor who wore the same brown corduroy jacket every single day for an entire semester, They talked like two people who had nowhere else to be. "How's married life?" Colton asked at some point. "Casual? Light?" Cece opened her mouth to say fine. That's what she always said. Fine, good, great. The three words that kept the world from looking too closely. But something about Colton's eyes made her stop. Maybe it was the way he listened, not politely, not waiting for his turn to speak. Actually listened. Like what she said mattered. "It's not great," she said, and then she laughed, a broken, surprised sound. Because she'd never said that out loud before, not to anyone, not even to herself. Colton didn't push. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just nodded and signaled the bartender for 2 more drinks. That was the night everything changed. Not because of what happened later in his hotel suite, but because of that moment. The moment someone saw her and she didn't look away. He walked her to her car after the event. The parking garage was cold and echoing. Her heels clicked against the concrete. She started to cry. Not because she was sad, because she was overwhelmed by the simple kindness of a man who remembered her thesis presentation from 9 years ago. Colton held her. Not tightly, not possessively. The way you hold something that might break if you squeeze too hard. She told him things she hadn't told anyone. About the loneliness. About the silence in her house that felt heavier than noise. About the way Darren looked at her sometimes, through her. Like she was a window and he was staring at something on the other side. She didn't tell him about the hitting. She wasn't ready for that. Maybe she thought if she didn't say it out loud, it wasn't fully real. Later, in his hotel suite, for the first time in years, someone touched her like she mattered. Not roughly, not transactionally, not the way Darren had in the early months, when intimacy was another form of control. Colton touched her like he was asking permission, with every movement, like her body was hers first and his second. She left before dawn. She drove home in the dark with the windows down, the cold air on her face, the highway empty. For 45 minutes, she was free. Then she pulled into her driveway. She sat in the car. She rehearsed her normal face in the rear-view mirror. Smile. Not too much. Tired eyes. That's fine. She's always tired. Walk in. Put the keys on the hook. Start the coffee. Become invisible again. She never called Colton. She deleted his number. Blocked him on social media. She told herself it was a mistake. A moment of weakness. Collapse in judgment. But mistakes don't make you feel alive for the first time in years, she told Margot now, sitting on the couch in borrowed pajamas. Mistakes make you feel guilty. This didn't feel like guilt. It felt like oxygen. Margot was quiet for a long time. She held her coffee mug with both hands. The steam curled between them like a question. "You need to tell him," Margot said. "About the baby." "He's a billionaire, Margot. A billionaire. And I'm a woman sitting on your couch in your pajamas with a garbage bag of clothes. What would I even say?" "You'd say the truth. That's always enough." Cece shook her head. "The truth is that I slept with someone while married. The truth is that I let my husband hit me for 2 years and never told anyone. The truth is that I'm 31 years old and I have $42 to my name. That truth doesn't look like enough to me." Margot set her mug down. "I've been biting my tongue for 3 years, Cece. 3 years of watching you shrink. You used to take up space. You used to laugh so loud that people in the next room would smile. You used to argue with professors and win. What happened to that woman?" "She married Darren Hargrove," Cece said. The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. "Somewhere along the way, I became invisible," Cece whispered. "Not to the world, to myself." That night, lying on Margot's couch in the dark, Cece put her hand on her stomach. The baby was the size of a raspberry. She'd looked it up at the pharmacy, standing in the family planning aisle, Googling on her phone like a teenager, hiding something from her parents, a raspberry, tiny and fierce and completely dependent on a woman who couldn't even depend on herself. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered to the dark, "but I know I can't undo it, and I know I don't want to." The ceiling fan above her clicked with each rotation. Click, click, click. She counted the clicks the way she'd counted the cracks in the porch, the way she'd counted her steps on the asphalt. 1, 2, 3. Something about counting kept the panic at a manageable distance. She thought about Darren, about the early days, how he'd brought her flowers every Friday for the first 6 months, how he'd opened the car door for her, how he'd introduced her to Brenda, and Brenda had smiled and said, "Welcome to the family, sweetie." The way Brenda squeezed her hand during that introduction, too hard, just a little too hard, but Cece had dismissed it. People squeeze hands. It doesn't mean anything. It meant everything. The realization hit her like cold water. Darren never loved her. The marriage was Brenda's design. Brenda needed someone to manage Darren, to cook, to clean, to absorb his anger so it didn't land on Brenda, to hand over a paycheck. Cece wasn't a wife. She was an employee who didn't know she'd been hired. "I was recruited," she said to the empty room, "not romanced." That was layer 2. The recognition. The pain of understanding that the thing you mourned never existed in the first place. You can grieve a death. But how do you grieve something that was never alive? The next morning, Cece woke to the sound of Margot on the phone in the kitchen. "I need a favor," Margot was saying. "Her phone is still in the house. Can you get it? The back door might be unlocked." Margot had a friend in Cece's neighborhood, a fellow nurse named Donna who lived 2 streets over. Within an hour, Donna had retrieved Cece's phone from the kitchen counter where Darren had left it. He probably assumed Cece had no way to get it. He assumed a lot of things about what Cece could and couldn't do. The phone lit up with notifications. 7 missed calls from Darren's number. 2 text messages. Darren, 9:47 the night before. "Come get your stuff tomorrow, or it goes in the trash." Brenda, 10:15. "And don't think about coming back. The locks are changed." Cece stared at the messages. Her thumb hovered over the reply button. Then she locked the phone and set it face down on the table. "Don't respond," Margot said, watching from the kitchen doorway. "Not yet. Not until you have a plan." "I don't have a plan." "You will. But first, I need to show you something." Margot sat down with her laptop. Years ago, when Cece and Darren first opened their joint bank account, Margot had helped Cece set up the online banking portal. Margot still had the login credentials saved in her browser. It had been a joke at the time. "Just in case you forget your password," Margot had said. Just in case. The account balance was $83.17. That wasn't the shocking part. Cece knew they didn't have much saved. Darren said money was tight. Darren always said money was tight. The shocking part was the transaction history. Transfer to B. Hargrove, $2,000. March 15th. Transfer to B. Hargrove, $1,500. April 2nd. Transfer to B. Hargrove, $3,000. April 28th. Transfer to B. Hargrove, $1,800. May 10th. The list went on. Months and months of transfers, totaling over $37,000. All to Brenda's personal account. Cece's salary as an office manager at a dental practice was $39,000 a year. She deposited every paycheck into the joint account because Darren said he was handling the finances. He said he was building them a future. He was building something, all right, just not for her. "He gave it all to Brenda," Cece said. Her voice was flat, empty. "My money. He gave my money to his sister." "Not gave," Margot said. "Funneled. There's a difference. Giving is a choice. This was theft. Cece scrolled through the transactions. She scrolled slowly. The way you read a letter you already know contains bad news. Each line another cut. Another piece of evidence that her entire marriage had been a financial crime disguised as a relationship. But these up a $37,000, she whispered. In 8 months. She kept scrolling. Further back. Past the transfers. To the older messages in the account. Text notifications she'd never seen because Darren had changed the alert settings on her phone. He told her it was a software update. She believed him. She believed everything because believing was easier than the alternative. Her old texts from Darren filled the screen. She scrolled through them like she was reading an obituary. The early ones were sweet. Missing you, babe. You're my everything. Can't wait to get home to you. Then the tone shifted, gradually, like temperature dropping. Where are you? Answer me. You have 5 minutes. I called 3 times. Where were you? Don't make me ask again. The erosion of sweetness into surveillance. It happened so slowly she didn't notice. Like a beach disappearing 1 grain of sand at a time. You don't see it until you're standing on rock. I should have seen it, Cece said. You did see it, Margot replied. You just couldn't afford to believe it. That distinction mattered. Cece wasn't blind. She was surviving. There's a difference between not seeing and not being able to look. Margot pulled up a blank document on her laptop. We're making a timeline, she said. Everything you remember. Dates, incidents, witnesses. This is your armor now. So Cece talked, and Margot typed. They worked for 3 hours, reconstructing 2 years of abuse. The first time Darren grabbed her wrist, December 2 years ago. They were arguing about Christmas plans. Brenda wanted them at her house. Cece wanted to visit her own mother. Darren grabbed her wrist and twisted until she agreed. Then he kissed her forehead and said, See? That wasn't so hard. The first shove. February. She'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. He pushed her into the bathroom door. The handle left a bruise on her lower back. She told the receptionist at work she'd slipped on ice, the first slap. April. She asked about a charge on the credit card statement, a restaurant she didn't recognize. You're imagining things, he said. Then his hand connected with her face. Quick. Almost casual, like swatting a fly. Then the escalation. Summer, the fists, the kicks, the hair pulling, and Brenda, always Brenda, in the background, watching, sometimes participating. That one time, in September, when Brenda held Cece's arms behind her back while Darren went through her phone. We're just helping him trust you, Brenda said. Wives should have nothing to hide. The memories came flooding, not chronologically, in waves. The Thanksgiving when Brenda spilled red wine on Cece's white dress and laughed. The Christmas when Lorraine, Darren, and Brenda's mother watched Darren scream at Cece over burned gravy and said, Marriage is hard, dear. The taste of that Thanksgiving turkey, dry and over-salted, but Cece ate every bite because refusing food in that house meant a lecture. The smell of Lorraine's lavender perfume during Christmas, sweet on the surface, suffocating underneath. I keep thinking about the good times, Cece said. The first year, the picnics, the road trip to the coast, his laugh. He had this laugh that made you feel like you were the funniest person alive. That wasn't love, Margot said gently. That was the hook. I know. Cece's eyes burned. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less. You can understand the trap and still grieve the bait. That was the memory flood. Layer 3. The grief for what she thought she had. The ache of every good memory now poisoned by context. Every I love you reframed as manipulation. Every kiss a down payment on future violence. The breathing room came naturally. Cece stopped talking. Margot stopped typing. They sat in silence for 10 minutes. The refrigerator hummed. A car alarm went off somewhere outside and then stopped. Cece traced the pattern on Margot's couch cushion with her finger. Circles, over and over, like she was trying to smooth something that couldn't be smoothed. "I'm not crazy," she said finally. "The texts prove it. The bruises prove it. The bank statements prove it. I knew it was bad. I just couldn't say it out loud." Margot reached over and took her hand. "You're saying it now. That's what matters." Across town, in a penthouse office on the 42nd floor of the Ashford Technologies building, Colton Ashford sat at his desk at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep. He was 38 years old, dark hair going silver at the temples. The kind of face that magazines like to photograph, but that Colton himself rarely thought about. He'd built his company from a dorm room project into a $4.2 billion enterprise. He'd been on the cover of 3 business magazines. He'd shaken hands with 2 presidents. None of it mattered right now. On his desk sat a manila folder. Inside was a private investigator's report. 27 pages, single-spaced. He'd hired the PI 3 weeks after the alumni fundraiser. After Cece vanished from his life like smoke. She'd deleted his number, blocked him on every platform, disappeared so thoroughly that a less persistent man would have taken the hint. Colton Ashford was not a less persistent man. The report detailed everything. Her marriage to Darren Hargrove, their address on Maple Crest Drive, Darren's employment at a mid-sized construction firm, Brenda Hargrove's job as a paralegal, and 2 domestic disturbance calls, both logged, both resolved, with no charges filed. Colton read those 2 lines 4 times. His jaw tightened. His hands balled into fists on the desk. He thought about that night in the parking garage, the way Cece's hands shook when she talked about going home, the way she flinched when he reached for her arm, the way she laughed at his jokes, like she'd forgotten laughter was allowed. "I should have asked," he said to the empty office. "I should have pushed." But he didn't push, because Cece had drawn a boundary, and Colton was the kind of man who respected boundaries even when they scared him. She'd left before dawn. She'd blocked his number. She'd made her choice. Except now he knew it wasn't really a choice, not the kind of choice you make freely, the kind you make when every other option has been closed. He picked up his phone. He didn't call Cece, not yet. He wasn't sure she'd answer. He wasn't sure she'd want to hear from him. He wasn't sure of anything except that he couldn't do nothing. He texted his attorney instead. "I need you to look into a Darren Hargrove. Everything. Now." The reply came in 40 seconds. His attorney never slept either. On it, Colton set the phone down and stared out the window. The city spread below him like a circuit board. Millions of lights. Millions of lives. Somewhere out there, a woman he couldn't stop thinking about was in trouble, and he had every resource in the world to help her. The question was whether she'd let him. Back at Margot's apartment, morning arrived without permission. Cece woke on the couch, disoriented. For 3 seconds, she didn't remember. 3 beautiful, empty seconds where the world hadn't ended yet. Then it flooded back. Darren's boot, Brenda's smirk, the garbage bag, the porch. She made it to the bathroom before the nausea hit. Morning sickness mixed with trauma. Her body couldn't tell the difference. It just knew something was wrong and purged accordingly. She stared at herself in the mirror, split lip, swollen and purple at the edges. Bruised cheekbone the color of a plum. Red eyes from crying. Hair she hadn't brushed in 2 days. She thought about the baby, about Colton, about the $42 in her secret savings account, the one Darren didn't know about, the one she'd opened 2 months ago at a different bank putting away $5 here, $10 there, skimming from grocery money like a thief in her own marriage. $42. That was the sum total of her independence. $42 and a positive pregnancy test. She squeezed toothpaste onto her finger because she didn't have a toothbrush. Such a small thing. Ridiculous, really. She'd been beaten, thrown out, robbed of $37,000. And the thing that made her cry was the toothbrush she didn't have. But that's how it works. The big traumas get processed later, in therapy, in quiet rooms, in the shower at 3 in the morning. It's the small indignities that break you in real time. The toothbrush, the garbage bag instead of a suitcase, the borrowed pajamas that smell like someone else's laundry detergent. I deserve better than this, she said to the mirror. I know that now. I think I always knew. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers meant bill collectors, or telemarketers, or Darren calling from a different line. She answered anyway, because at this point, what did she have left to lose? Cecilia? The voice was calm, warm, familiar, in a way that made her chest ache. It's Colton. Please don't hang up. Cece's hand tightened around the phone. Her breath caught. The bathroom suddenly felt very small. How did you get this number? She asked. I hired someone to find you, Colton said. No apology in his voice, no embarrassment, just honesty. After you disappeared, I looked for you. I know about Darren. I know about the police calls. Shame flooded through her like hot water. It came fast and violent, turning her skin pink. This powerful, successful man knew her secret. Knew she was the kind of woman who stayed with someone who hit her. Knew she was weak. Cece, are you there? He asked. I'm here. I'm not calling to judge you. I'm not calling to rescue you. I'm calling because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try. She leaned against the bathroom wall. The tile was cool against her back. She could hear Margot in the kitchen, the kettle whistling. There's something you should know, Cece said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. I'm pregnant, Colton, and it's yours. Silence. The longest silence of her life. She counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each one heavier than the last. Then he spoke. Not, is it mine? Not, are you sure? Not, what do you want from me? 3 words that undid something in her chest. Are you safe right now? She started crying. She didn't mean to. She'd told herself she was done crying, but those 4 words broke something open that she'd been holding shut for years. No one had asked her if she was safe. Not once. Not her mother, who lived in Florida and called once a month. Not her coworkers, who saw the long sleeves in July. Not the police officers who responded to those 2 domestic calls and took Darren's word that everything was fine. I'm at my friend's apartment, she managed. Give me the address. I'll be there in an hour. Colton, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. Give me the address. She did. He arrived in 53 minutes. Margot opened the door and sized him up the way nurses size up patients, looking for vital signs, not of illness, of character. He wasn't what Cece expected. No suit, no driver, no entourage. He wore jeans and a gray t-shirt, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He stepped inside and saw Cece sitting on the couch. The bruises, the split lip, the borrowed clothes, something moved across his face. Pain, fury, restraint. His hands balled into fists at his sides, then slowly opened. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her. He sat on the floor across from her, literally lowered himself so he wasn't looking down at her, so they were eye to eye. Tell me what you want to do, he said. Not what I can do, what you want. The distinction mattered. After 2 years of being told what to do, when to do it, how to feel about it. Being asked what she wanted felt like being offered water after a drought. Margot stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching, evaluating. She made 3 cups of coffee. She put sugar in Cece's. Without asking. 2 sugars. Splash of cream, the small knowing of a real friendship. The kind of detail that takes years to accumulate and seconds to recognize. Cece told Colton everything. She told it flat, emotionless, clinical, like she was reading a medical chart. That's how survivors tell their stories. Not because they don't feel it, because feeling it while telling it would be like drowning and narrating the water at the same time, the marriage, the abuse, Brenda's control, the financial theft, the baby. Colton listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't gasp or shake his head or say, "Oh my God." He just listened. And when she was done, he asked one question. Do you want to fight them, or do you want to disappear? Cece stared at him. For a long time, the coffee Margot had made grew cold between them. The question hung in the air like something solid. For 2 years, nobody had asked her what she wanted. She'd forgotten the shape of her own desires. They'd atrophied like unused muscles. But somewhere underneath the scar tissue, and the fear and the 37,000 stolen dollars, something stirred. "I want to fight," she said. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet. Like a pilot light catching, like the first crackle of a fire that's been building beneath the surface for longer than anyone knew. Darren struck first. He always struck first. That was his strategy. Hit before you're hit. Accuse before you're accused. 3 days after throwing Cece out, he filed for divorce. The grounds, abandonment. His wife, he claimed, had voluntarily left the marital home. She'd walked away from her responsibilities. She'd abandoned her husband. Brenda drafted the papers. Of course she did. Brenda worked as a paralegal at a small law firm downtown. She knew enough legal language to make lies look legitimate. The papers were clean, professional, devastating, but the legal filing was just the beginning. Within a week, Darren and Brenda had executed a coordinated attack. They froze the joint bank account, locking Cece out entirely. They changed the locks on the house. They filed a trespassing warning at the local police station, stating that Cecilia Hargrove was not welcome on the property and should be treated as a trespasser if she appeared. Then Brenda made a phone call to Cece's employer, Dr. Morrison's dental practice, where Cece had worked for 4 years. Brenda told them Cece had been hospitalized for mental health reasons, that she was unstable, that the family was deeply concerned. Cece showed up to work on Monday morning in clothes Margot had lent her, a blouse that was slightly too big, pants she'd hemmed with safety pins. She walked through the front door with her chin up, ready to pretend everything was normal. Dr. Morrison met her in the hallway. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Cece, maybe you should take some time," he said. "For your well-being." "I'm fine," she said. "I'm ready to work." "Your family called. They said you've been going through some things. We just think it might be best if you took some time off. Indefinite. Paid, of course. Well, partially paid." She stood in the hallway of the dental office where she'd spent 4 years organizing charts, managing schedules, making the whole operation run smoothly. And she understood. They weren't giving her leave. They were pushing her out. Politely. The way polite people destroy your life, with concern on their faces and daggers in their words. "They're not my family," Cece said quietly. Dr. Morrison looked confused. "They said they were your family. They're the people I'm fleeing from." She left the office, walked to her car, sat in the driver's seat for 11 minutes. She knew because she watched the clock on the dashboard. 11 minutes of sitting in a parking lot, unable to drive, unable to cry, unable to do anything except breathe. She called Colton. I lost my job. I know. My attorney found out an hour ago. How? Because we've been monitoring everything Darren and Brenda do. And what they're doing is systematic destruction. They're not just divorcing you, Cece. They're erasing you. That word, erasing, it was the right word. They were taking her apart piece by piece, her home, her money, her job, her credibility, turning her into a ghost in her own life. I have someone you need to meet, Colton said. Jolene Pratt was 45 years old. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and had a handshake that could crack walnuts. She'd practiced family law for 19 years. She had a reputation for one thing. She dismantled abusers in court the way surgeons remove tumors. Precisely, completely, without leaving anything behind. She sat across from Cece in her office, reviewing Margot's documentation, the photos, the dates, the financial records, the text messages. She turned pages slowly. Her face revealed nothing. When she finished, she removed her glasses and looked at Cece. This isn't a divorce case, Jolene said. This is a domestic violence case with financial fraud components. And we're going to treat it as such. Within 48 hours, Jolene filed a barrage of legal motions. Domestic Violence Protection Order, Emergency Financial Forensic Audit, a motion to restore Cece's access to marital assets, and a formal complaint against the attorney who had processed Darren's fraudulent abandonment filing without basic due diligence. He filed for abandonment, Jolene said, almost amused, against a woman he physically threw out of her own house. That's not abandonment. That's assault followed by displacement. Any first-year law student could see that. But Darren had friends, small-town friends in small-town places. The kind of friends who play golf with judges and drink beer with cops. This wasn't going to be easy. I need you to understand something, Jolene told Cece. They're going to come after you harder now. When abusers realize they've lost control, they escalate. Are you prepared for that? Cece thought about the garbage bag on the porch, the boots against her ribs, the toothbrush she didn't have. I've been preparing for 2 years, she said. I just didn't know it. That night, alone in Margot's guest room, the enormity hit her. Colton had offered to put her up in a hotel. A nice one. Safe, anonymous. She'd refused. I need to do this on my own terms, she told him. If I let you pay for everything, I'm just trading one dependency for another. I need to know I can stand on my own, even if my legs are shaking. He understood, or at least he tried to. That was the difference between Colton and Darren. Darren heard no as defiance. Colton heard no as information. The guest room was small, a single bed, a nightstand with a lamp that buzzed slightly when you turned it on, a window that looked out onto the parking lot. Cece lay in the dark and listened to the sounds of the building. A television somewhere, water running through pipes, the distant thud of someone's bass-heavy music. She called the one person she shouldn't have, Lorraine. Darren's mother, 62 years old, lavender perfume, tight smile, eyes that saw everything and acknowledged nothing. The phone rang 4 times. Lorraine picked up. Her voice was flat, unsurprised. Cecilia. Lorraine, please. You know what he's doing. You've always known. A pause. You should have been a better wife, Cecilia. The line went dead. Cece sat on the floor of the bathroom. She turned on the shower, so Margot couldn't hear her cry. The water sounded like rain, warm rain on cold tile. She pulled her knees to her chest and pressed her forehead against them. I'm going to build us something good, she whispered to the baby. I don't know how yet, but I will. The steam filled the small bathroom. The mirror fogged over. Her reflection disappeared. And somehow, in that disappearance, she felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Freedom. Not the permanent kind, not the kind you can hold, but a flash of it, a glimpse. My arm. I knew, and I stayed. But staying my arm. I knew, and I stayed. But staying isn't the same as choosing. Sometimes staying is just surviving, and surviving is enough. The forensic audit took 11 days. It felt like 11 years. Jolene's financial investigator, a woman named Paulette with reading glasses and the demeanor of someone who found human deception predictable, dug through 3 years of bank records, tax filings, and business registrations. What she found was worse than theft. Brenda Hargrove hadn't just been siphoning money from the joint account. She'd been running a small-scale fraud operation through a company called Brightstone Consulting. On paper, Brightstone provided subcontractor services to Darren's construction employer. Invoices were submitted quarterly. Payments were deposited into Brenda's account. Professional, clean, completely fake. There were no subcontractors. There were no services. Brightstone Consulting was a mailbox at a shipping store and a bank account with Brenda's name on it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the paperwork. She used your social security number, Jolene told Cece, sliding documents across the desk. On 3 of the invoices, your name appears as a listed partner of Brightstone Consulting. You supposedly signed the incorporation documents. Cece stared at the papers. Her name, her social security number, a signature that looked close to hers but wasn't. Brenda had forged it, practiced it, perfected it. She was setting me up, Cece said. The realization came slowly, like dawn. If anyone ever investigated, it would lead back to me. Correct, Jolene said. You weren't just a victim, Cecilia. You were the fall person. The abuse wasn't random cruelty. It was strategic. Keep you scared, keep you quiet, keep you too broken to ask questions. And if everything fell apart, you'd be the one holding the bag. Cece sat in Jolene's office and read the framed quote on the wall behind the desk. The truth doesn't need your permission. She read it 7 times while Jolene made phone calls. 7 times. Each time it meant something different. The first time, it meant nothing. Just words on a wall. The second time, it felt like an accusation. The truth had been there all along, and she hadn't faced it. The third time, it felt like forgiveness. The truth existed whether she was ready for it or not. By the 7th time, it felt like a weapon. The truth was on her side now, and she was finally ready to use it. Meanwhile, Colton's world was colliding with hers in ways she hadn't anticipated. His private investigator discovered that Darren had been building a counter-narrative, a story designed to discredit Cece before she could discredit him. Darren had been telling everyone who would listen that Cece was unstable, delusional, that she'd had a mental breakdown and fabricated the abuse for attention. He'd even approached a local reporter, a college buddy named Todd Blevins, who wrote for the Herald Tribune to plant a story. The headline Darren pitched: Billionaire Tech CEO targeted by unstable woman in custody scheme. The story Darren was building was elegant in its cruelty. Cece was mentally ill. She'd invented the abuse. She'd deliberately targeted a wealthy man. The pregnancy was either a lie or a trap. Darren was the real victim. Colton's response was measured, cold. The kind of calm that expensive lawyers and media strategists produce when the stakes are high enough. We don't play defense, Colton told his publicist. We tell the truth first. But the truth was complicated. Releasing Cece's story meant exposing her bruises, her silence, her shame, and she wasn't sure she was ready to be that exposed. This is your decision, Colton told her. Every step, every word. I will support whatever you choose, but I want you to know that Darren is building a weapon, and the only shield we have is the truth. Cece sat in Jolene's office the next morning, The fraud documents were spread across the desk. Margot's photos were in a folder. The text message timeline was printed and highlighted. "Do you want to press charges?" Jolene asked. Cece hesitated. Criminal charges meant public records, court appearances, media attention. Darren's family would retaliate, his friends, his network, the small-town machinery that had protected him for years. She looked at the bruise photos. She looked at the bank statements. She looked at the Brightstone invoices with her forged signature. "Yes," she said. "All of it." Jolene nodded. "Good, because the accountant Brenda fired 6 months ago has been looking for someone to listen. She's got copies of everything, and she's ready to talk." The accountant's name was Sheila Compton. She was 51 years old. Brenda had hired her to manage Brightstone's books and then fired her when Sheila started asking questions about where the money was actually going. Sheila had kept copies, not because she was noble, because she was careful. And careful people don't delete things. "I told Brenda the invoices didn't match any real work," Sheila said during her recorded statement. "She told me to mind my own business and handed me a severance check. I cashed the check, but I kept the files, just in case, just in case." 2 words that were about to dismantle Brenda Hargrove's carefully constructed world. But for Cece, the victory was still distant. That night, the vulnerability hit her like a wave. She'd been strong all day. Strong in Jolene's office, strong on the phone with Colton, strong when Margot asked if she'd eaten. At 2 in the morning, alone on the guest room bed, the strength evaporated. She thought about what Lorraine had said. "You should have been a better wife." She thought about Darren's story, the one where she was crazy, where she was the villain. She thought about all the people who might believe him, who might look at her and see what he wanted them to see. She thought about the baby, growing inside her while the world outside fell apart. She lay in the dark and cried, quietly, the way you cry when you've been doing it for so long that your body knows how to do it without making a sound. Tears running sideways across her face and into the pillow. The mattress springs creaking slightly with each breath. "I'm not the villain of this story," she whispered. "I never was. They just needed me to believe I was." Neil Beckham called Jolene's office the next day. "I want to make a statement," he said. "I should have done this a long time ago." Neil Beckham was 40 years old. He'd been Darren's best friend since they were 12. Same Little League team, same high school, same taste in music, beer, and excuses. He showed up at Jolene's office on a Thursday morning wearing a wrinkled polo shirt and carrying a flash drive. "What's on it?" Jolene asked. "Recordings," Neil said. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, from shame. "I recorded conversations on my phone. I didn't plan to. But Darren would say things when he was drinking, and I kept my phone recording. I don't know why, but maybe I knew someday it would matter." The recordings were devastating. Darren, drunk, laughing. "You got to keep them off balance. That's the trick. One day you're sweet. Next day you remind them who's in charge." Cece learned that fast. Brenda, on speakerphone, coaching. "Stop letting her talk to that friend of hers. Margot. She's a problem. Isolate her. Make her think Margot doesn't care. Tell her Margot said something behind her back." And Lorraine. Quiet, lavender-scented Lorraine. "Just make sure she doesn't go to the police. We can't afford that. Your father's pension is tied up in the house. If she talks, we lose everything." Jolene listened to the recordings twice. Her face was unreadable. When they finished, she turned to Neil. "Why now?" she asked. "You had these for months." Neil looked at his hands. Big hands, working hands, hands that had done nothing while his best friend beat his wife. "Because she was on the porch," he said, barefoot, with a garbage bag. "I drove past that night. I saw her sitting there, and I kept driving. I went home and I poured a drink, and I told myself it wasn't my business. He paused. His voice cracked, but it was. It was always my business. Darren's my oldest friend. We grew up together, but there's a line, and he crossed it so far back, I can't even see it anymore. Brenda's the one running the show. She always has been. Darren's just her weapon. The protection order hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Cece walked into the courtroom wearing Margot's navy dress, slightly too big in the shoulders, slightly too long in the hem, but clean, pressed, as close to armor as borrowed clothes could get. Darren sat across the aisle in a tailored suit, charcoal gray, the kind of suit that said, "I'm a respectable man." Brenda sat beside him, white blouse, pearl earrings, the picture of composure. Their attorney, a man named Gerald Watts, who specialized in making abusers look like victims, stood with his hands clasped. "Your Honor," Gerald said, "Mrs. Hargrove is a manipulative individual who abandoned her marital home and is now seeking to weaponize the court system against my client." Jolene stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit A." She pressed play. Darren's voice filled the courtroom, laughing, bragging, explaining how to keep a woman off balance. The words were clear. The audio was sharp. Neil Beckham's phone had excellent recording quality. The courtroom went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight. The judge's face changed. Not dramatically. A tightening around the eyes. A slight forward lean. The small physical shifts that mean someone is paying very close attention. Gerald Watts asked for a recess. The judge denied it. "Continue," the judge said to Jolene. The next recording played, Brenda's voice, then Lorraine's, then Darren again. The pattern was undeniable, coordinated, systematic. A family conspiracy to abuse, isolate, and financially exploit one woman. The courtroom smelled like old wood and paper and recycled air. The fluorescent light above Cece buzzed, a soft, persistent sound that she'd remember for the rest of her life, the sound of being heard. The judge granted the protection order. Full no contact. Darren was ordered to vacate the marital home within 72 hours. Brenda was named as a co-respondent in the ongoing financial fraud investigation. As Cece walked out of the courtroom, Brenda caught her in the hallway. Brenda's composure cracked for the first time. Her mascara was slightly smudged. Her jaw was tight. She stepped close to Cece. Too close. "You think you've won," Brenda hissed. "You don't know what we're capable of." Cece looked at her. Really looked. For the first time, without fear, without the reflexive flinch, without the downcast eyes. "I know exactly what you're capable of, Brenda. That's why I brought receipts." She walked past. Through the courthouse doors, into the parking lot, into the late afternoon sun. Margot was waiting by the car. Colton stood beside her. Neither of them spoke. They just stood there. Two pillars, silent and steady. Cece drove to the house. Her house. Alone. She wanted to do this alone. She walked through the front door using the key Jolene had obtained through the court order. The house was different. Darren had taken some furniture. The living room was half empty. The bookshelf she'd organized by color was bare. He'd taken the books. She didn't care about the books. The kitchen still smelled like burned garlic from that last night. The spaghetti sauce stain was still on the wall. Nobody had cleaned it. Of course nobody had cleaned it. Cleaning was Cece's job. Without her, the mess just stayed. She opened every window, every single one. The evening air poured in, warm and alive and carrying the smell of cut grass from a neighbor's lawn. She stood in the living room and breathed, just breathed, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the therapist taught her. But this time it wasn't about managing panic. It was about reclaiming space. Then she walked to the bathroom. Her toothbrush was still in the holder, right where she'd left it, small and blue and unremarkable, the most ordinary object in the world. She brushed her teeth with her own toothbrush, in her own bathroom, in her own house. And she cried. Not from sadness, not from fear, from relief. Pure, simple, overwhelming relief. The kind that makes your knees buckle and your chest expand and your breath come out in ragged gasps that sound like laughter. She was home, battered and broken and pregnant and terrified, but home. 2 weeks passed, 2 weeks of legal motions and sleepless nights and morning sickness and slow, careful progress. The criminal investigation into Brenda's fraud accelerated. Sheila Compton, the fired accountant, provided 3 years of records, invoices, bank statements, email correspondence where Brenda explicitly instructed her to backdate paperwork. The evidence was overwhelming, not circumstantial, direct. The district attorney took the case, not because it was large. In the grand scheme of financial fraud, Brightstone Consulting was small, but because the DA was a woman named Patricia Lockwood, who had spent 15 years prosecuting domestic violence cases before moving to financial crimes, she saw the pattern: abuse as infrastructure, fraud as architecture, a family system designed to exploit one person for the benefit of 3. Brenda was arrested on a Wednesday morning at her office. The paralegal who drafted fraudulent divorce papers was handcuffed in front of her coworkers and walked out of the building in full view of the parking lot. Darren panicked. The cool, controlled man who kept his wife off balance was suddenly off balance himself. Without Brenda to think for him, he floundered. He called Cece directly, violating the protection order. I didn't know about the fraud, Cece, I swear. Brenda handled everything. I'm a victim here, too. There it was, the playbook. Deny, deflect, reverse. Make himself the injured party. It used to work. It used to make her doubt her own eyes, her own bruises, her own memory. Not anymore. You're not a victim, Darren, she said. Her voice was steady, quiet. The qualifiers were gone. No, I think, or maybe, or I'm sorry. Just clarity. You're a man who beat his wife and stole her money. And now you're a man who just violated a protection order. I'm hanging up. My lawyer will be in touch. She hung up, called Jolene. He just called me, Cece said. That's a violation. I know, Jolene replied. I was waiting for him to do something stupid. They always do. Darren was arrested that evening for violating the protective order. The booking photo would later appear in the Herald Tribune. Not the story Darren had pitched about a billionaire preying on a mentally ill woman. A different story. The real one. Lorraine Hargrove broke her silence, but not the way Cece had hoped. Not with remorse or recognition or even neutrality. Lorraine went on social media. She posted a long, rambling message accusing Cece of seducing a billionaire, destroying her family, and manufacturing abuse claims for financial gain. This woman came into our family with nothing and tried to take everything, Lorraine wrote. My son is a good man. My daughter is a good woman. Cecilia Dawson is a predator. The post was shared 112 times in 24 hours. The comment section split into factions. Some believed Lorraine, some didn't. The internet does what the internet always does. It turns private pain into public spectacle. But Colton's media team was ready. They'd been waiting, not for an attack, but for the right moment to tell the truth. Cece released a statement. Jolene drafted it. Cece approved every word. No mention of Colton's wealth, no sensationalism, no dramatics, just a timeline, dates, facts, court records, photos. For 2 years, I was physically abused by my husband, Darren Hargrove. With the knowledge and participation of his sister, Brenda Hargrove, and the silent complicity of his mother, Lorraine Hargrove. I have documented evidence, court-granted protective orders, and criminal charges now pending. I did not manufacture these claims. I survived them. The court of public opinion shifted, slowly. Then all at once, the way truth moves when it finally gets enough oxygen. A week later, something unexpected happened. Cece's phone rang. The caller identified herself as Tessa Ashford, Colton's sister. Tessa didn't call Cece directly at first. She called Margot. She asked permission. She respected boundaries. Already she was nothing like Brenda. They met for coffee at a small bakery on the edge of town. Tessa was 34, brown hair and a loose braid, sneakers, no makeup. She ordered a black coffee and a blueberry scone and looked at Cece with eyes that were warm and careful and completely without agenda. "My brother has been different since he met you," Tessa said. Quieter, more careful with his words. "I don't know, what's going to happen between you two. That's your business. But I want you to know something." She reached across the table and put her hand over Cece's. "You and this baby have a family, if you want one. No conditions, no expectations. Just a door that's open whenever you want to walk through it." Cece stared at Tessa's hand on hers. She thought about Brenda, the way Brenda's hand had squeezed hers at the wedding. Too tight, possessive, a warning disguised as welcome. Tessa's hand was light, warm, ready to let go the moment Cece pulled away. This was what a sister-in-law was supposed to feel like. This was what family was supposed to feel like. The contrast was so stark, it hurt. "Thank you," Cece said, and meant it in a way she'd never meant those two words before. "I didn't destroy their family," Cece told Margot that night. "I just stopped being the foundation they built their lies on. And without me holding it up, everything collapsed on its own." That was the truth win. Not revenge, not calculated destruction, just truth applied consistently with documentation. The Hargroves fell apart not because Cece attacked them. They fell apart because she stopped absorbing the damage. Without a victim to absorb the blows, the violence turned inward. Darren spiraled. Brenda scrambled. Lorraine isolated. The system that required Cece's silence couldn't function without it. Justice isn't always a courtroom verdict. Sometimes justice is simply refusing to be the thing they need you to be. 6 months later. The courtroom was behind her now. The filings, the hearings, the depositions, all of it processed and cataloged and reduced to legal shorthand in folders Jolene kept in a locked cabinet. Brenda Hargrove pleaded guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of identity theft. 18 months in a federal facility in Maryland. She'd served 12 with good behavior. Her law firm terminated her employment. Her paralegal certification was revoked. The woman who'd drafted fraudulent documents for a living would now have a fraud conviction on her own record. Darren took a plea deal. Violation of a protective order. Simple assault. 2 years of probation. Mandatory anger management classes. A permanent restraining order that would outlast his pride by decades. His construction company let him go. Not for moral reasons, for liability ones. Lorraine Hargrove went silent. After the social media post, after the backlash, after the court records became public, and her version of events collapsed under the weight of documentation. She didn't apologize. She didn't reach out. She simply disappeared into the silence that she'd always used as a weapon. The silence, Cece realized, was its own kind of answer. Some people don't have the capacity for remorse. They just have the capacity for quiet. Cece stood in the doorway of a small cottage on Birch Lane. White clapboard siding, a red front door, a porch with no cracks. The cottage sat on a 1/4 acre of land, with a maple tree in the backyard and a garden bed that was currently just dirt and ambition. Colton had found the place, a rental owned by a retired school teacher who lived in Florida. Cece paid rent herself, $575 a month. she'd insisted. I need to pay my own way, she told Colton. Even if it's hard, even if it's slow. I need to know that I can. He understood. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince her that his money could make it easier. He just nodded and said, I know. Because he did know. He knew that independence wasn't about comfort. It was about proof. Proof that she could survive on her own, that she wasn't trading one cage for another, that the life she was building was hers. She'd gotten a new job. Office manager at a pediatric clinic on Maple Street. The head pediatrician, Dr. Alvarez, had hired her after a 15-minute interview. You're organized, you're professional, and you showed up on time, Dr. Alvarez said. That's 3 more qualifications than the last person I hired. The salary was modest. $36,000 a year. She'd never felt richer. Her belly was round now. 6.5 months. The baby moved constantly, kicking, rolling, hiccuping at inconvenient moments. A tiny person making themselves known, demanding space in a body that was finally learning it had space to give. Colton came by 3 or 4 times a week. Not every day. They'd talked about that, about pacing, about building something that wasn't born from crisis, but from choice. He'd sit on the porch with her in the evenings, and they'd talk. About the baby, about work, about nothing, the kind of nothing that isn't empty, the kind that's full of all the things you don't need to say because someone already understands. He put his hand on her stomach one evening. Late September, the fireflies were out. The maple tree rustled in a breeze that smelled like fall approaching. The baby kicked hard. Colton flinched, then laughed. A real laugh, surprised and delighted, and completely unguarded. That's a strong kick, he said. Gets it from me, Cece said. He looked at her. In the porch light, his face was half shadow. Serious now. I'm scared, Cece said. Of what? Of this being real. Of trusting it. Of waking up one day and finding out it was another trap. Colton nodded slowly. I'm scared too. I've spent my whole life building things I could control. Companies, systems, structures with predictable outcomes. This isn't that. This is messy. This is uncertain. And I'd rather be scared with you than comfortable without you. Not a fairy tale. Not, you complete me. Not a rescue story where the billionaire swept in and made everything perfect. 2 imperfect people choosing to be imperfect together. That was enough. That was more than enough. Margot came by every Sunday. She brought pastries from the bakery on 5th Street, almond croissants and cherry danishes and a sourdough loaf that they'd tear apart with their hands and eat with butter. She'd stay for hours. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes Margot just sat on the couch and read while Cece organized the nursery. The quiet company of a true friend, not performing friendship, just being it. One Sunday, Margot held Cece's hand and said nothing for a very long time. Then she said, I'm proud of you. For what? For all of it. For the porch, for the garbage bag, for walking 11 blocks with no shoes, for saying yes when Jolene asked if you wanted to fight, for every single moment where you could have given up and didn't. Cece squeezed her hand. 2 sugars, splash of cream. 12 years of friendship distilled into the smallest gestures. The nursery was almost finished. Soft yellow walls. Cece had painted them herself. Over a long weekend, Tessa helped. They'd put down drop cloths and opened the windows and played music from Tessa's phone. While they rolled paint onto the walls, Tessa got more paint on herself than on the walls. They laughed so hard, Cece had to sit down. A white crib sat against the far wall. A gift from Tessa. Simple, sturdy. A mobile of paper stars hung above it, turning slowly in the draft from the window. On the windowsill, a small framed photograph. Not Colton, not the cottage, not the nursery. It was a photo Margot had taken of Cece the day the protection order was granted. Outside the courthouse, the borrowed navy dress, red eyes, trembling hands, chin up. She kept the photo there so the baby would someday know. Their mother fought for them before they were born, before they had a name, before they had a face, before they had anything except a heartbeat and a woman who refused to let that heartbeat be silenced. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Cece stood in the nursery alone. The paint smell had faded. The room was warm. Soft light came through the window and fell across the crib in gold bars. She pressed her hand against the wall. The paint was still slightly tacky from a touch-up she'd done that morning. When she pulled her hand away, a faint impression remained. Her handprint, imperfect, slightly smudged at the edges, permanent. She didn't wipe it off. She walked to the bathroom. Her toothbrush was in the holder. Her holder, in her bathroom, in her home. She brushed her teeth. She looked at herself in the mirror. The split lip was a memory. The bruise was a ghost. The woman staring back at her was someone she was still getting to know. Not the girl from college who argued with professors. Not the wife who learned to make herself small. Someone new, someone in between, someone becoming. "There you are," she whispered. She thought about the porch, the concrete steps, the 3 cracks, the sprinkler hissing, the dog barking, Mrs. Calloway watching from behind her curtain, the garbage bag, the bare feet, the warm asphalt burning with every step. She thought about the woman on those steps, the woman who sat there counting cracks while her world ended, the woman who had $42 and a secret and absolutely nothing else. She wanted to go back to that porch, not to relive it, to sit beside that woman, to put a hand on her shoulder, to say what nobody said that night. "You're going to be okay. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. You're going to walk 11 blocks on bleeding feet and knock on a door and someone is going to open it. And then you're going to do the hardest thing you've ever done. You're going to tell the truth. And the truth is going to cost you everything you thought you had and give you everything you actually need." She finally understood that the prison door had been unlocked all along. She'd been her own warden. Not because she was weak, because she'd been taught that staying was strength, that enduring was love, that silence was loyalty. It wasn't. Strength was the garbage bag. Strength was the 11 blocks. Strength was Margot's door, buzzing open at midnight. Strength was saying yes, all of it, in Jolene's office. Strength was the courtroom, the recordings. The truth told flat and clinical because feeling it while telling it would have been like drowning and narrating the water at the same time. Strength was the toothbrush, her toothbrush, in her holder, in her home. Cece turned off the bathroom light. She walked through the cottage, checking the windows. Locked. Checking the doors. Locked. An old habit from a life she was leaving behind. But some habits protect you, and some habits imprison you. And she was learning to tell the difference. She stopped at the nursery door, looked in. The paper stars turned slowly above the crib. The photograph on the windowsill caught the last of the evening light. The handprint on the wall was barely visible. You had to know it was there to see it. She put her hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, strong and steady and insistent. A person making themselves known, demanding to be felt. "Welcome home," she said. "It's not much, but it's ours. Every square inch of it, every wall, every window, every crack in the porch that I'll get around to filling one of these days. Ours." She closed the nursery door softly, walked to the kitchen, made a cup of chamomile tea, sat at the table she'd bought at a second-hand store for $35. The chairs didn't match. The mug had a chip in the rim. The tea was slightly too hot. It was perfect. Outside, the evening settled over Birch Lane. The streetlights came on one by one. The maple tree rustled. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. A sprinkler hissed on. The world kept moving. The world always kept moving. But this time Cece was moving with it. Not running, not hiding, not counting cracks or steps or seconds, just moving. Forward, into whatever came next, with her hands open and her chin up, and her door locked, and her toothbrush in the holder. Her own woman, her own home, her own story. Finally. Closing credit. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real emotional value and life lessons. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being here.